Welcome into episode 124 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm August Trometer.
A keychain security standoff with Apple, following up on the FaceTime and Facebook stories, and Nest tries to unruffle some feathers. It's another packed edition of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. Here's a story causing a bit of consternation, and you say, oh good, because stories on this show never do that. Mac Rumors says German security researcher Linus Hens this week discovered a new zero-day macOS vulnerability dubbed Key Steal, which, as demoed in a video, can be used to get all of the sensitive data stored in the Keychain app. How does he do it? Well, we don't know exactly, which is sort of the source of the consternation. According to Mac Rumors, Hens appears to use a malicious app to extract data from the Mac's Keychain app without the need for administrator access or an administrator password. They can get passwords and other information from Keychain, as well as passwords and details for other macOS users. A malicious app, you say? Another piece on the issue from Forbes says Hens found he could create an app that was able to read what was in the keychain without requiring explicit permission from the victim. His mock malware didn't require special privileges, like administrator-level permissions. Running a simple app is all that's required, Hens said. So you get somebody to install a malicious app as how it works on the user side. How it works under the hood remains a mystery. While Hens sounds like a white hat, letting the world at large know what he's found rather than selling the exploit to the highest bidder, white hats gotta eat. Turning back to Mac Rumors, Hens has not shared the details of the exploit with Apple and says that he won't release it because Apple has no bug bounty program available for Mac OS. So blame them, says Hens. In a statement to Forbes, Hens clarified his position and said that discovering vulnerabilities takes time. Finding vulnerabilities like this one takes time, and I just think that paying researchers is the right thing to do because we're helping Apple to make their product more secure. Apple does have a reward program for iOS that provides money to those who discover bugs, but there is no similar payment system for macOS bugs. So the way I see this story, there are two things going on. The first is, as far as we know, best practices will keep us safe from this.
Yeah. This is a sort of a rogue app, meaning that it's not in the App Store. Now, potentially, this exploit could be used in an app in the App Store, but at this point in time, doesn't seem like that's what's going on. On your Mac, you want to make sure that you have turned on protections for what apps you can download and install. You've got two choices, really, and there's a third mystery choice, but I'll explain that in a second. The first choice is App Store only apps, and that's the safest level, and I encourage you to do that. The second level is App Store, along with trusted developers who've got a signed certificate through Apple that aren't in the App Store. And if you know those trusted developers, that's okay too. There's a Wild West option, but in the last couple of versions of the Mac OS, they've taken that away, and you actually have to use some command line trickery to enable it. My recommendation is don't do that. And first of all, if you're a developer, then you probably know how to do that on a command line. If you're not a developer, you probably don't have any business installing an app that requires you to do that. So just be safe. Don't download everything a website tells you to. You don't necessarily need that. And also, don't click links and emails to download apps unless you absolutely 100% are sure that that link is valid, because you don't want to download Hens's app so he has access to your keychain.
Now, let's be clear. When we're talking about downloading his app, he is a good guy. I mean, at least he seems to be a good guy. He has not, because the word you said earlier was his app is a rogue app. And his app is sort of standing in place of what a rogue app could do.
Correct.
I mean, what he's saying is he's found a way to do this. He's written an application to do this. He's not releasing this application. You don't have anything to fear from this particular individual and this particular app that he's written. However, he has written a proof of concept. So something just like it could be out there. And then all the things that August just said are things that would keep you safe from things like it out there.
Yeah, I think what he's doing is horribly irresponsible. I understand the desire to get paid. Everybody has rent, But what it comes down to is now he's told every bad guy out there that this is possible. Mm-hmm. And that's the irresponsible part. And, honestly, somebody could actually install an app on his computer and get access to his keychain using, if they did enough research and found out how he did it with his own app, they could go into his own computer and do it. So I just think it's really irresponsible, and it's really too bad that he doesn't do the right thing.
See, okay, here's the thing. I don't know that I'm on your side on that. And I've talked to a couple of other security people who I don't know that they're on your side on that either. But here's the thing, because that was part 2 of this. I mean, part 1 was best practices would keep you safe from something like this. Part 2 is the bug bounty program, or lack thereof, where the Mac is concerned. As I said before, Mac Rumors points out that there is a bug bounty program for iOS, but not one for the Mac. I mean, that's the part that I think is wrong. And here's the thing. Well, on Twitter, Renee Ritchie at iMore actually took issue with Hence's position as well, calling his position garbage. He's saying disclose to Apple to help protect users, then use the follow-up to push for when, not if, the bug bounty program is launching. There absolutely should be one, and yesterday, but don't hold users hostage for your entitlement. Here's the thing. I know that I've been having this conversation for at least the 2 years that the checklist has been going. It has not been a mystery to developers that there needs to be a bug bounty program for the Mac. The only people who seem to find that mysterious are the people who make the Mac.
I'm not saying that Apple shouldn't have a bug bounty program, but, Renee Ritchie is right. He is holding users hostage, and he's holding Apple hostage. And he's doing it in a very, very public way that endangers people. And that's the thing that I have a problem with. It would be one thing if he would have sent that video straight to Apple and said, hey, look, I've got this 0-day bug and it's a really bad one. And but I want paid. That's one thing. But to put it on YouTube, that's just a jerk move.
I hear what you're saying. I will also remind you that Apple got shamed into paying winners of the Shot on iPhone contest that it ran at the first of the year. It sounds like Apple got shamed into paying the kid who found the group FaceTime flaw, which, we'll talk about in a little bit. I mean, I'm not a fan of holding anybody hostage, but sunlight is the best disinfectant, is what some people say. And honestly, doing this stuff in public, look, I don't think it's going to happen anyway, honestly, because I think when you start talking about security at this level, and we're not even talking a really high level here, but I think when you start talking about security at this level, with the exception of the kind of people who would be inclined to listen to a podcast like this one, general public, their eyes just sort of glaze over, right?
Sure.
If you start talking about this kind of thing. And so I think the best shot that this Hence person had of actually getting any kind of action was doing it publicly. I mean, go back to the kid who did find that security flaw in FaceTime. If he knew somebody at Apple Insider, or if he knew somebody at TechCrunch, he would have gotten a call within 24 hours.
Sure.
But his mom didn't know who to call, so she called Apple, which, I mean, and I'm not even going to fault Apple on that necessarily. It's just they are gigantic and they hear from millions of people a day, or at the very least tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people a day. Why should they take her any more serious than anyone else, right? But
sure.
then, so she called Fox News, which also is not built for that. I mean, this guy, I mean, maybe he could have called Apple Insider. Maybe he could have called TechCrunch. But I mean, he's big enough, apparently, that going public, I mean, there's like a 10% greater chance that Apple does something, it seems to me, based on the amount of notoriety that he stirred up, really it seems more likely that they'll find some way to deal with him quietly or ignore him and figure out how to fix it themselves.
Sure. And in fairness, I don't know what happened behind the scenes. Maybe he did contact Apple ahead of time and got no response. If he's a security researcher, he knows the right people to call at Apple. And maybe he didn't get the response that he wanted, and that's why he released it publicly. But if he didn't do that, then I still think it's kind of a jerk move.
Let's do one other thing really quickly. He didn't release this publicly. He released evidence that something like this could happen publicly. I mean, it's not like he let people know how to do it. But of course, letting people know that it's possible is halfway to letting people know how to do it. I mean, right. I get your argument in that respect. I just want to be sure that we're careful with our words. When you say released it publicly.
The video. I'm just talking about the video.
Right. He hasn't done anything that would automatically tell people how to do it. But of course, you know, saying they went that way is a good way to lead bad guys in that direction. Let's follow up on the stories covered on last week's checklist. The fix for the group FaceTime flaw is looking like a bit of a bear. I'm sure everybody knows the flaw I'm talking about. We talked about it here for about half the show last week, and of course it got covered all kinds of places. This was a flaw that had people able to eavesdrop on a FaceTime call, a group FaceTime call that is, even if the recipient of that call never accepted the call. When the story broke, Apple knocked the service offline. It also said that it knew what was wrong and it would have a fix later in the week, and that was last week. Last Friday, knowing that it was going to miss its self-imposed deadline, Apple issued a statement picked up by VentureBeat. In that statement, Apple apologized, addressing the first and worst part of the security vulnerability, the fact that it happened at all. The company also gave a shout-out in the statement addressing a second part of the story, the part where members of the Thompson family reported the issue to Apple about a week before news of the vulnerability hit the public. Quoting Apple's statement, "We have fixed the group FaceTime security bug on Apple servers, and we will issue a software update to re-enable the feature for users next week," which is now this week. "We thank the Thompson family for reporting the bug. We sincerely apologize to our customers who were affected and all who are concerned about this security issue. We appreciate everyone's patience as we complete this process. We want to assure our customers that as soon as our engineering team became aware of the details necessary to reproduce the bug, they quickly disabled group FaceTime and began work on the fix. We are committed to improving the process by which we receive and escalate these reports in order to get them to the right people as fast as possible. We take the security of our products extremely seriously, and we are committed to continuing to earn the trust Apple customers place in us." Now, I say it's looking like a bit of a bear because as we record this, it's Wednesday night of week 2 of the group FaceTime flaw, and the fix is still not out. I mean, there's still time, but, you know, time in the second week of we'll have it for you this week is winding down. Now, also, it looks like they're going to pay the 14-year-old who found the flaw and whose mom spent the better part of a week trying to get Apple to pay attention to what she'd found, or he'd found, rather. I never heard that they actually weren't going to pay the kid. That's why I said in the last segment, it seems that Apple was shamed into paying the kid. I never heard that they were going to pay him. I will say, though, no matter how much it is that they're going to pay him, that is money well spent. At the very least, from a PR perspective. Like, I don't know how Apple ended up finding out about this. But, you know, if you have a 14-year-old who's trying to get in touch with you, or the mother of a 14-year-old who's trying to get in touch with you for a week, and then Apple's going to magically say, "Oh, wow, we found out about this thing, and I don't know who that kid is." Yeah, this is good money. Go ahead and toss him a couple of bucks to maybe go to college or whatever it is they're planning on doing with the money that he gets.
Yeah, and it's a great way to sort of sweep the issue under the rug just a little bit. You know, make everyone happy and pretend it didn't happen. Which is great from as you said, from a PR perspective. And Apple is a company that has plenty of dollars that it can do that with. It's just unfortunate that it took them so long to actually acknowledge there was a problem and do something about it.
Well, and this goes to, like, I don't have it here in the script, but I know that there's an Apple executive actually visited the family in Arizona. One of the things that they talked to them about was how could we make it easier for people to get in touch with us with issues like this, which I think is kind of funny because you're asking them.
Right.
I mean, they spent like a week trying to get in touch with you. And if you say to them, well, how could we make this easier for you? I don't know, maybe acknowledge it the first time. Or
I was listening to last week's show, and, quite honestly, Apple has more money than it knows what to do with. And why they don't just hire a couple of people to answer security@apple.com emails is beyond me. It seems like the easiest solution is just, give a team of people who can vet this stuff, access to an email, and then, push it on to engineers if they find out that it's valid.
I hear you. The question is, does Apple? By the way, there is another stop for this. It's so funny you said, now people can forget about it. Congress has decided maybe not so fast. A little over a week after word of the flaw hit the streets, Mac Rumor says the U.S. Committee on Energy and Commerce has sent Apple a letter wanting to do a bit of follow-up. In the letter sent to Apple CEO Tim Cook, lawmakers said, while these are wonderful tools when used right, the serious privacy issue with group FaceTime demonstrates how these devices can also become the ultimate spying machines. This is why it's critical that companies like Apple are held to the highest standards. Your company and others must proactively ensure devices and applications protect consumer privacy, immediately act when a vulnerability is identified, and address any harm caused when you fail to meet your obligations to consumers. And then the questions that they had, these are not the exact questions because those were pretty wordy, but when did Apple first find out about the flaw? Did Apple know about it before being contacted by the Thompson family? That's the family from Arizona I mentioned earlier. Did anyone else tell Apple about the vulnerability? What's Apple doing to find out how many people had the flaw used against them? Will Apple inform and compensate those people? When will Apple inform those people? Which I love. And are there more vulnerabilities like the ones found last week? Lawmakers also want a timeline of exactly what steps were taken and when they were taken to address the vulnerability after it was initially identified. They're looking for a written response 2 weeks from this past Tuesday when they sent the letter. So basically by the 19th of February, Tuesday the 19th of February, is when Apple's homework is due. Congress getting involved. Useful, useless? What's your thought?
Boy, I'm so on the fence on this one. I do think it's really important and that they understand technology, they understand how it affects our daily lives, and they understand the security and privacy aspects of it. So getting involved, getting these questions answered, I think is a good thing. That said, Zuckerberg goes to Congress, 3 times a week and says, whoops. And, Facebook is let off the hook. So I really don't know what the point of this is. I just don't understand it.
It might go maybe to what I was saying in the last segment about sunlight being the best disinfectant.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe it is embarrassing for Apple to have to sit there and say we goofed. It would also be great if, and let's back up. They haven't been called to testify or anything like that. Nobody's going to the Hill. They've sent a letter. They want a written response. Now, it's possible if they're not satisfied with the written response, or if somebody thinks it would score them good points to be on TV yelling at the exec of a tech company, it's still possible that somebody could end up before Congress over this or before a committee over this. If it stays with just the written thing, then I think maybe they do really just want answers, and maybe they're hoping that, it'll rattle somebody's cage, on how serious this whole thing is. We'll probably just have to let it play out and see. I do love the question, though. It's like, so are you planning on telling people, and when are you planning on telling them? Okay, yeah. So I'm not sure that's really a question as much as a leading question, but okay. So the other story we hit last week was Facebook's truly Facebook method of collecting data. Surely you remember this story. Facebook was paying people 13 to 35 years old up to $20 per month plus referral fees to sell their privacy by installing the iOS or Android Facebook Research app. Rather than sending people to the App Store, Facebook was using Apple's enterprise developer program to get iOS users to download a profile, giving them access to all the information they want, and that was a violation of the developer agreement they had with Apple. So, Apple revoked Facebook's enterprise developer program certificates, knocking any legitimate apps Facebook was using internally out of commission. That included beta builds of Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger, as well as employee apps like the one for transportation. Now, one possibility pointed out last week by Nicholas Todchek on this show was that other companies could be up to the same sort of shenanigans. And while he was supposing that, literally while we were recording this show, the story broke that Google was found to be doing the same thing with an app of its own. So, Apple revoked Google's enterprise developer program certificates, knocking any legitimate apps Google was using internally out of commission, including beta apps meant for public eventually, as well as employee apps that workers need throughout the day. So it sounds like quite the shakeup, though it was very short-lived. Facebook's developer certificate was reissued in somewhere between 24 and 36 hours. Google's was reissued in 5. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Were you disappointed that both were back to normal in such a short amount of time? And were you surprised that both were back to normal in such a short amount of time?
Oh, of course I was disappointed. This is just to sit there and just take data from somebody's phone unwittingly for the person is, to me, just obnoxious. And you don't spend time in a corner for that. You get spanked. Mm-hmm. And this was not them being spanked. I'm going to go on record saying I think Facebook needs to change its name to security data theft.
I don't think you'll ever get anybody to sign up for that, though, August.
I don't think so.
I think that could present a problem.
I do think the reason Google was back on in 5 and Facebook took over a day was simply because Google probably has a lot closer ties with Apple, and Apple still uses some of the Google services. So Google has its own whip that it can use against Apple.
Google also, they were really upfront. Like the second, I believe it was TechCrunch who contacted Google and said, hey, what you're doing here looks a lot like what Facebook was doing. Google pulled the app immediately. Google apologized immediately. Google issued a statement. Before, it sounded like Apple found out about it. But of course, once TechCrunch found out about it, that pretty much means Apple has found out about it, even if it didn't know.
Sure.
I was hoping, maybe this is, again, not to keep using this term, but what I was really hoping was going to happen was that Apple was going to make Google and Facebook say something. And I don't know what that would be, because as you point out, Zuckerberg practically has just a room on hold in DC so that he can go and, say, gee whiz, I can't believe this happened again. I'm so sorry. I don't know how. And then, see you guys next week, right? He's got to be on a first name basis with the bailiffs in the Senate at this point, or whatever they are, the guards, the Senate police. And so I don't know that even if Apple had made them say something, that it would have meant anything. And yet it was really kind of disappointing to see this whole thing happen and be over so fast. And everything, back to normal as far as anyone was concerned. Well,
the thing is I think Apple did the right thing by shutting them down as soon as they found out.
Yeah.
What puzzles me, given the last story, is that no one from Congress has piped up about finding out why in the world they were stealing people's data. Or taking people's data, not stealing it, but taking their data.
See, that's the thing. To expect Facebook to not siphon up as much data as it can is it's like the whole, with the frog and the scorpion thing. I can't help it. It's in my nature, right? Where you can really hold both Google and Facebook to account is the fact that they willingly broke the developer agreement they had with Apple. And you can't, they just can't pretend that it didn't realize they were doing that. Because they were walking people through a way to sideload an app and then paying them to do that. To me, it's horrible the kind of data collection that they're trying to do, but they apparently entered into that telling people, hey, we want access to all this information and we'll give you money in return. I mean, that's almost more honest than Facebook has been about a lot of this stuff, except the way they were able to get all the information was saying, oh, and by the way, we're not going to tell Apple. Let's just keep this between you and me.
Right.
And however many other tens of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people were doing it. It's really kind of amazing. Do you think, this almost feels like a silly question, but I'm going to ask anyway. How likely do you think this is to change either of those companies' behavior?
Can a leopard change its spots?
So you're changing the subject now?
No, I'm just saying that they are both huge organizations with a culture of taking personal data and using it for their own gain. And there's nothing wrong with that, but this is just shifty. And it just, they're not going to change. Just say it like that. They're not going to change at all.
Unruffling some feathers. We'll get to an interesting email from Nest in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Next time you go into a coffee shop, look around. There are so many more Macs in use today than there ever have been before. The CEO of Jamf says he thinks that the numbers are going to get even bigger over the next couple of years. I noticed the growing number of Macs. You notice the growing number of Macs. You gotta believe that bad guys notice that too. They want your data, but you can stop them with MacScan 3 by SecureMac. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for well over a decade. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. So huddle over your laptop, knowing that SecureMac has your back with MacScan 3. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by SecureMac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. So I got a great email from Nest yesterday, which I shall henceforth call Nesterday, because maybe I'll just do that for the rest of this show. We did a story a couple of weeks ago, August, about some people in Northern California whose Nest camera was taken over, and then pranksters, merry or otherwise, freaked the family out by telling them that North Korea was about to bomb 3 cities in the U.S. with nuclear weapons. So let's say not merry pranksters then. The matriarch of the pranked family was really mad. She thought Nest should do something more, and bless them, Nest has. While still laying the blame on the pranked family, actually. In recent weeks, says the email that went out apparently to all Nest customers, since I got one. In recent weeks, we've heard from people experiencing issues with their Nest devices. We're reaching out to assure you that Nest security has not been breached or compromised. We also want to remind you of a few easy things you can do to get the most out of Nest's security features. And then, do you know what they did, August?
What'd they do?
They sent out a checklist.
How handy.
I know, it's really nice, right? For context, their email continued, even though Nest was not breached, customers may be vulnerable because their email addresses and passwords are freely available on the internet. If a website is compromised, it's possible for someone to gain access to user email addresses and passwords, and from there, gain access to any accounts that use the same login credentials. What? Who would do that? Nobody would do that. While we continue to introduce additional security and safety features, we need your help in keeping your Nest account secure. There are several ways for you to protect your home and family. Mr. Trometer, what does Nest think people should do?
Well, I think we've talked about them before on the show. First of all, enable two-step verification. It's absolutely the most important thing you can do with any service. Two-step verification offers a huge layer of security on top of your just email and password. You just get a text with a special code, and you add that and to the login, and you're in. And every service I have, I've set up two-factor authentication. It's really that important.
I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and he said something that I had heard before, but I had forgotten. It was actually, we were talking about a science fiction show, and somebody just was able to get in using a voice print. And I was like, no, you can't just use a voice print. You need two-factor authentication. And my friend said, something you have and something you know, right? Because that's kind of a two-factor authentication kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's another way to think about it. If, two things is too much to remember, just remember what the two things are and you're good. What else did Nest suggest?
Always choose strong passwords. Even on the Mac, it now recommends certain strong passwords. If you sign up for a service or change your password, use those. They're almost impossible for someone to guess. So please just use strong passwords. Set up family accounts. Don't give your email and password out to other people. Be alert. Make sure you're double checking that email before you click that link, because that's how you'll get gotten.
Yeah. Let me point out really quickly. I don't remember there being a link to anything in this Nest email. So we're talking about a Nest email right now. If you get a Nest email tomorrow that says something like click here for more information, don't go to Nest's website because
type the URL in.
Yeah, because there's that issue, right? Like people hear, oh, Nest is sending out an email about, oh, this must be that email. Bad guys hear that the Nest email is going out, so they'll try to find ways to spoof it and get the information. What else, sir?
Protect your home network. If you're using the standard login and password for your router, change it immediately. That's the easiest way for people to get in. You can actually look up online in manuals what the default login and password for a Wi-Fi network is. So change that. Set up and use a guest network if your router supports it. Don't give out your username and password to anybody.
What I loved about the Nest email, by the way, is it was passive aggressive for a good cause. I was actually really impressed with their response because, their options, their options were, and it took them about a week, but, they sounded a well-crafted, or maybe 2 weeks, they sounded a well-crafted, well-worded letter that says, listen, we're aware of this thing, but it's kind of on you. But, they did it in a way that wasn't just like, they could have just been defensive about it. I love the fact that, there are two things I love. I love the fact that they sent out a list of easy to follow instructions that are sort of, easy to understand and easy to implement. And I also love the fact that we've been talking about a lot of those things here for the past couple of years.
Also, I can imagine at Nest headquarters, there were probably about 10 days of straight meetings with marketing people on one side of the table and lawyers on the other, trying to figure out exactly how to word that letter.
Day one was probably just, sitting around like a writer's room going, okay, how about this? Dear stupid. No. I don't think we can do that. I think we have to take it, until finally you get to day 10 and it's like, dear valued customer.
I do think Nest is doing the right thing there, though. And I think that email is an example of helping people do the right thing the right way.
Yeah. It really was refreshing to see that email, honestly, because everything that they said was laid out in such a straightforward, common sense way. Bravo to the Nest PR team. I guess that's what I'll say. Bravo to them. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. You'll find notes for this show, for last week's show, for all the shows we've done before, and any shows to come. SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.